And there we are. Live once again. In 1080p streaming today. Brad Ray, Ben Samuels, Don't Let the Facts. The first one of the year. I am fired up. Fired up. Mainly because
new year, new me, new
same.
podcast. No,
I just love this. I don't know. I love this a little train whistle. I love everything about it. Sorry. Can I listen to this instead of you talking?
Yes. I said it last time. Maybe we should just transition into making this like a live host DJ session. We can have call-ins. You know, maybe the music really is something we should lean into. I don't know.
Ben, Happy New Year, buddy.
Happy New Year. How's it going? How we feeling today? I know that you've been on an absolute tear on the podcast and content creation. How's it going?
I am fantastic. My throat hates me. New Year's Eve. So I did. We didn't do a show New Year's Eve, did we? No. So I did.
No, tell us about the tradition, though.
Yeah. So I did an hour and a half with Greg Williams for Overtime, our show on Thursdays at 10 on Rig Links. Then I did an hour and a 40-minute podcast with Mark Rosano on geopolitics. And then I did another 40 minutes or so, an hour, I can't remember, with Chris Fenton on U.S.-China. So it's, and so today I've done Textile and Gas Podcast, The Dragon Feeder with Chris Fenton, Energy Week with Ellen Wall, and now, of course, David Last with Ben Samuels.
I don't know what the best for last, but I mean, it's certainly last.
It's definitely last. Thank God. So you were saying before we got on, you're an idiot, and I said stop. I fired the music up and was going to let you continue. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Why are you an idiot?
Oh, that's a loaded question. That's really open-ended. I don't think we even have time. Like, we just started the podcast. I don't think we have time to get into that question. But at a high level now, I was remarking to you that so last, I guess, let's see, in late summer of 2018, I decided to transition and kind of move home base to Colorado Springs to test out, not being in Midland full time. Realized pretty quickly that given the deal flow and kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis, it is really important for me to be in Midland. So I transitioned back in November of last year, and I was just lamenting the fact that. Hey man, if I had that Palantir, if I had that crystal ball to be able to look at what was going on, what was going to be coming in the next 16, 18 months, I probably would have just stayed. We've talked about it a lot off air, but I mean, I love getting out in nature, being in Colorado. I love the winter as well. And so that's something I'm certainly thinking about now, but
how is Colorado compared to like Denver as far as like lockdowns, liberal versus conservative? I don't know much of the demographics. I know it's like about an hour south of Denver, roughly, but I don't know what the makeup is.
Yep, just about an hour south. In 2018, actually, Colorado Springs was across the entire country. Colorado Springs was the number one place where there were the most amount of millennials moved to Colorado Springs compared to any other city in the country in 2018. And so there has been a massive increase in population growth. In the time that I was there were entire neighborhoods that were stood up. There were entire shopping centers. And I mean, there's a lot of commercialization. Colorado Springs has kind of been a secret to a degree, for a long time, but certainly the secret has gotten out. So it's, I wouldn't necessarily call it a metroplex yet. And there is still certainly a large distance between Colorado Springs and Denver, but similar to Houston to the Woodlands, where when I was growing up in Houston to Woodlands was that seemed like forever away, and now it's one thing.
It's the Granbury of Colorado.
Thank you. There it is. I think Granbury is like another hour, but that's neither here nor there.
It's the Granbury to Dallas-Fort Worth. I got you.
But I could certainly see, in the next 3-5 years, the Colorado Springs, Denver area being a lot more closely compacted and built out where there's not nearly as much between there. Beautiful part of the country. In terms of the lockdowns and things, I mean, obviously Colorado is very liberal. Denver has been one of the worst in terms of the lockdown restrictions, and Colorado Springs has kind of followed suit. But it definitely has a different feel. Let me say it that way. Like Denver has kind of more of a commercialized and is a full-fledged city, and there's the whole ecosystem that runs with that. And the Colorado Springs is more sort of fledgling and very young. I mean, like I said, millennials. I mean, 20s, 30s is kind of the target audience, and the majority of people in Colorado Springs. It's a real vibrant place. I loved it. Still on some property. I'm building that place about 100 miles, give or take, west of Colorado Springs, and so Colorado Springs is kind of certainly the closest large city to where I'm going to be.
So I would say I love the Smoky Mountains. I don't have a problem with the Rockies. I love the Smokies though. It's just a little bit cooler, a little bit more trees. I like kind of the fog coming off the Smokies in the morning. I don't know if you spend a lot of time in the Smokies, but and you can live in Tennessee, which you don't have to deal with. You get no income tax. No state income tax, lower property taxes than here in Texas. So I would consider moving to Tennessee. I'm not saying I'm moving to Tennessee, but if Tennessee wants me, I mean, they brought in Ben Shapiro. If they want the big dog, it's going to cost, right? I mean, Ben Shapiro willingly came. If you want the big dog to come, it's not going to be like that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to cut that check. Right. I've actually got a couple of really good friends in Nashville, and they love it. I mean, really good things to say about it. So,
a little bit further east into the Smokies, Gatlinburg, not Gatlinburg per se, but kind of somewhere up in one of those areas where it's not too touristy, but where you could live. And I need to be here's what I want to see. So the Venn diagrams, you have fast internet, no people. Wherever those two, wherever I can find that overlap of fast internet and no people. That in the Smokies, those three circles, wherever that Venn diagram is, that's where I want to be.
You better find it before I do.
I know. So let's talk about it, Ben. A lot to get to today's show. Let's get serious here for a second. Ben, is Miami the newest tech hub? The mayor hopes entrepreneurs to relocate to the 305. I'm going to say maybe. What do you think?
I think that it's a conversation that I think has been happening for a long time. It's not some like new fad. I think there's a lot. I think the impetus for the push is really more of Silicon Valley. I think has proven itself not to be the place to be the hub of that tech center and really to thrive on that innovation. And I think that there's that ecosystem is craving for another place to go. Do I think Florida or in general, or do I think Miami is the answer? I don't. Real estate is sky high because there's not very much of it. Because as soon as the closer you get to the water, the tougher it is, right? And so there's not a ton of cheap real estate. The tax structure doesn't seem to be all that business friendly. It's certainly I think the corporate income tax. Don't quote me on this. You can look it up. You can fact check me as I'm talking here. But I think it's somewhere.
Facts. This is don't let that.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. So it's more. I think
it's 99.
There it is. No, I think it's somewhere between 4% and 5%.
Yeah.
And so, but when I look at that, one of the things, and I think I sent you an article that talked a little bit about this, and I think it made a great point. If you're looking for an area that has low income tax, all the energy in the world, good infrastructure, it's in a state that's friendly to business, etc. The Rio Grande Valley is essentially desolate. There's nothing down there. For the majority of the area, cheap real estate. You're in Texas. I mean, that sort of area seems to be a lot more apt to do something like down by like Brownsville or maybe like south of San Antonio, something like that, as opposed to going into Florida. I mean, what do you think?
So I'm always torn on the hub thing, because the hubs, once you become a hub, you have a competitive advantage. And so regardless of all the problems that San Francisco might have, we've been hearing about the problems in San Francisco for some time. And so, I'm sure you've heard me say this before, but I love this quote. It's probably my favorite quote that applies to stuff like this. And it's from, I think, Hemingway. And it's a novel or a short story maybe. And one guy asks the other guy, he goes, "How do you go bankrupt?" He goes, "Gradually, then suddenly." And that's, and so I think that applies to so many things in life. So how did San Francisco become a tech hub? Gradually, then suddenly. How will it not be a tech hub anymore? Gradually, then suddenly. And so, could you see people go to other spots? One thing to keep in mind is that you have Stanford right there. And so you've got a lot of smart folk who can go to Stanford and be churned out to these tech companies, who are already kind of what are they? Not millennials. They would be
X, right?
Yeah, whatever they are, whatever the group beneath us is, So they're there, they're kind of hip, they're on TikTok, all this kind of stuff, and they're there now. You have the University of Miami, and obviously a lot of universities in Florida, but I don't know if you have anything that's Stanford quality. In Texas, you would have Austin, which would be very close to what you're talking about. I don't know if they have a lot of programs geared for, those kind of things, but there is something to be said for, you talk about networking and starting a business and stuff like that. If you wanted to start let me put it like this. So if you want to start a insect repair, not repair, insect company like Terminix or whatever, right? Okay, you wouldn't want to start that in the sticks because there's not enough houses to service, right? So you want to start that where the houses are. Now, obviously, there's plenty of spots that can meet that demographic. If you're going to start a tech company, you have to start it in certain spots because unless you're going to service, unless you're going to try to put something that's purely online and you don't have salespeople, you need to be around people. And so certain types of people, who are you going to service them? How are you going to service them? And then you're going to want to hire people. So you're going to, hire someone in San Francisco to be your engineer, product manager, whatever. So I think it just has competitive advantages, and until those are stripped away over time, there's no sudden shift. I would say maybe one day we'll look up and say, 30 years ago, San Francisco was a tech hub. Now, it kind of is, it kind of isn't. But it also wouldn't surprise me to see after what we're seeing in California, a big shift to go back to California because, rates start dropping for apartments or housing, people moving out of the state. Or you might see they had to adjust their tax basis because it's not lucrative. So I'm a little reluctant to put the nail in the coffin just quite yet.
No, all good points. In terms of the the localization or the need to be close to people, I mean, I think Silicon Valley is kind of by definition, mostly SaaS and things that you don't need to necessarily, right? But the other piece of that is something that
funding, right? The funding, all the VC guys are out there too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think that we're walking into a world where like the location of the dollars is less important, and also I think that if the Silicon Valley, if the companies and sort of that ecosystem moves, the money's going to move with it, right? Because the money follows where, like the deals, I don't think follow the money. I think the money follows the deals. And then the other piece of California, by the way, that I forgot to mention is sort of the preamble here that I think is a really good point, and something that to your point is has not been addressed. Obviously, it hasn't been much of a concern, but I'm wondering kind of as we continue down these paths. So California, one of the things that they have, well, depending on which side of the coin you're on this, they've either done a very good or a very poor job about, unlike in Texas, if you sign a non-compete and an NDA in California, it actually has real teeth. That there are a lot of people that work in tech that are not allowed to they are effectively removed from the industry for a short period of time in order to to come back in. Whereas in Texas, I mean, like NDAs, I mean, everyone signs them, but they're not really, they really hold their weight. I don't know if that would be like a decision to move Silicon Valley, but I think it is something to be considered. Where if you've got a lot of engineers and a lot of these, I'm going to call them lower level. I don't really mean low level, but lower level employees that are if they're conflicted out of the workforce, but by moving the companies to another state, that problem goes away. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. So on the NDA thing, that's fascinating. I haven't heard that. So I'm just asking questions here, not disputing you. We looked at doing some NDAs at one time. This is in Louisiana. And what our attorney told us is that if you name specific regions, so like you can't say the South, but where I'm at in Hood County, maybe Tarrant County, Dallas County, you could potentially get away with that, or Ouachita Parish where we're at. No, so I don't know if it works in Texas, but Louisiana. So if you had like 3 parishes in Northeast Louisiana, you wanted to isolate, so you can't do this here. He said you would have a very good shot at doing that. So the tighter the scope is, the more enforceable it is. And he said, but you could not say Ben Samuels cannot work doing what we do in the United States of America because that wouldn't hold up. So I'm wondering, is it a California thing, or is it just because the area is so condensed they can do that? And just one more thing I want you to respond to. I know you want to respond, but one more thing. Because the IP is so important, whereas, I'm worried about, you stealing my client, going to a competitor, they're also looking about IP being gone, and so they're probably going to really hammer down on it hard. So go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, third point, very, very true. Absolutely. When you're talking about the impetus or the lion's share of the information being IP as opposed to client base, it totally changes the conversation. But and then to your first 2 points, keep in mind that the reason that the advice, because I've gotten this very similar advice from my attorneys at times, but that's because we own businesses that are not domiciled in California. If you're domiciled in California, the restrictions to the NDA and what that looks like are much different. And the reason for that is because of the actual labor laws with the state. So it has nothing to do with the tax law or the non-compete itself. The labor laws in the state make it so that those NDAs, you can actually sue for those breaches, and you don't actually have to. The burden of proof is much lower than it is in like a place like Texas, because in Texas you sign an NDA, it's still a binding contract. You still have to follow it, but the issue becomes when there's an NDA that's litigated, there has to be a specific point where the injured party, quote unquote, can point to a specific monetary damage in order for them to win the lawsuit. In California, that burden of proof it's not. I forget what the burden of proof is, but it's a lower threshold. It's a lower hurdle. So it changes it.
I'd be curious if you. So again, just taking what you say at face value as you leave. Well, that's it. Well, it was a great show today. Okay, Ben's walking off. That was fire the music up. Here we go. There we go. That was it.
No. Co-host? No, co-host? New co-host?
You walked off. I fired the music. I thought we were done. Like, that's a walk-off. Okay. Yes, it's a probably more amenable co-host. I don't know. Cats can be mean. So the only question I have is, let's just assume that again, I don't know, so I'm assuming it's true. If you're in San Francisco working for Ben Samuels Inc., you have the NDA. The NDA is enforceable, and then you come to Texas. I would imagine it wouldn't be enforceable then, though, right? The same thing applies. You're moving states.
This is a really good time for me to say that I'm not an attorney. Please consult your own lawyer. I have no idea. Good question. I'm not sure about that angle. I don't know.
Okay. The show's called Don't Let the Facts, just as everyone runs. So it's okay. We take liberties from time to time.
I feel like there should be like a running ticker at the bottom that just says like "Don't Let the Facts" and just like.
Oh, I can. Yeah, we can.
It just rolls.
Just I can do that. I can do that, or I can I can put a ticker on it. However you want it to be.
So going back to the Miami thing. I mean, so I think the underlying let me ask you this: do you agree with me that there is an underlying push to relocate Silicon Valley somewhere, or do you think that Silicon Valley has just sort of it's implanted? It is what it is, and you sort of know what that comes with, but it's not going to change.
I think, yeah. So I would say two things. First, I think people go to Silicon Valley because it has a market advantage in some categories, which leads me to people don't want to go to Silicon Valley because there's market advantages outside of Silicon Valley, right? So because the government's not forcing you to go to Silicon Valley, the market has determined that's where people want to be. They like the weather, they like the lifestyle, they like all this stuff. So they go there, they hire, they pay well. You kind of get this cycle, and the market says this. But then some people say, well, God, okay. Maybe I don't need to be there for whatever my software tech firm is. I can go to Miami, or I can go to New York City, or I can go wherever. So because they're not directed to by the government or encouraged to by the government, they then can go somewhere else. And so I think you could see not a decoupling, that's not the right term, but you could see a shift in a kind of a gradual move away, because the market is open and people could look at somewhere like South Texas or Miami or wherever and say, well, there's other advantages here that people aren't taking advantage of. And so, if the next Facebook, for instance, came out of, Austin, Texas, there's no doubt you'd have an influx of people trying to capitalize on whatever Facebook got right in Austin, Texas, and so it's hard for us to quantify, you watch sports, right? So if next year, let's just say next year, we're both Red Sox fans. If the Red Sox signed a 6'8" knuckleball throwing pitcher, and that's all he threw. He didn't throw a fastball. He didn't throw anything. He threw a knuckleball, and he won the Cy Young. He broke the record for strikeouts. He had 3 perfect games. Going into 2022, everybody would be scouring the earth looking for a 6'8" knuckleball pitcher, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's how we are. We look at stuff and go, it worked there. And we sometimes don't necessarily evaluate why it worked. We're not worried about the logic behind it. We're just like, that worked. Let me copy as much of that as humanly possible. So if the next Facebook came out of, Monroe, Louisiana, you would see folks going, there's something about Monroe. I don't know. It's by Duck Dynasty. It's by the river. It's humid. People rationalize it for a lot of things. The other thing, though, that does separate this a little bit is these are really rich people, a lot of money going around. So they're probably going to try to locate to areas that have nice vacations, good airports. So it is kind of hard to see them go to South Texas where the infrastructure for that lifestyle isn't in place.
I think the converse of that argument, though, is that I think that there's a benefit to it being completely undeveloped because then you can build all those things, right? I mean, what I'm talking about is building out the new Silicon Valley. So you build out the cities, you build out the airports, you build out the infrastructure, and it's sort of like you build it. If you build it, they will come. If you build out all those things and you make it so that those people have another option, So like going back to I had sent you. Go ahead.
I was just saying real quick. To your point, only thing I'd push back on and say West Texas makes more sense than South Texas because you could get cheaper power, potentially energy, by partnering with oil and gas companies off of their flared natural gas to run your data bank servers. If you think about all the energy they consume in Silicon Valley for the servers.
You're absolutely right. In my head, when I'm saying South Texas, you're right. I'm not thinking down where Corpus. I'm thinking about sort of in between El Paso and San Antonio and south.
Okay.
Sort of that swath of Texas. But you're right. Going back down into Corpus probably doesn't do you a whole lot of good. I mean, to kind of bring the point home, and we can move on to to the next thing here. But just in this year, I think most of these were out of California, but there was a couple from other places. But just this year, there have been something like 10 companies or 10 of the larger companies that have either announced that they are going to move to Texas, mostly from California, or that they have already. Oracle, Hewlett Packard, Tesla, Palantir Technologies, Apple, Facebook, Google, CBRE, which is, I think CBRE is the largest commercial real estate broker in the country, but if they're not the largest, they're one of the largest. And then Charles Schwab, Uber, and Dropbox. And so, those are companies that, to your point, those are all companies that don't need to be by their customers, right? Other than, I guess, arguably maybe Hewlett Packard because they don't want to ship things like across the world. But I mean, other than that, they don't really care where they are in terms of where their customers are based. But there's sort of already been that transition. I mean, do you see that continuing? Do you see that as more as the Teslas and Googles and Facebooks of the world? Of course, they're going to have multiple campuses, and so why not set one up in Texas? But we're never leaving California, kind of thing. I mean,
So, how much do you think Tesla leaving California is response to Elon Musk became a libertarian, or he was looking for a reason to leave and the pandemic provided the perfect excuse for him to leave? And it could be a little bit of both. I'm just curious, what do you think the real thought process is?
I think that's exactly right. I think it's A, B, and C. It's just the ego of Elon Musk. He got in a pissing match with the state of California and said, you either do this or we're leaving. And they didn't do it. I forget what it was, but they didn't do it, and so he left.
They didn't work.
What's that?
They wouldn't let their people work at the factories.
I thought there was a second thing. I thought there was something tax related, but you're absolutely right. There was definitely that.
There's definitely taxes and stuff too. But the thing that was that the bowling point in the summer was he was saying that we're going to go work. If you come arrest us, then arrest me, don't arrest the workers. And so
right.
And so that's also part of it. Is that how many of these companies are moving for other things that have nothing to do with it's tax basis. It's these other things that they're using excuses. And it's always hard to know when you look at these big companies, especially the amount of virtue signaling that some of these big companies do.
It's after ridiculous. Yeah. I don't know what just happened. But
I would just say this. I think New York is bigger trouble than San Francisco.
Oh, you mean just apples to apples? I completely
agree. If you had to ask me 10 years from now, we're talking in 2031, which city, I'm not saying fell off the map or anything like that, but which city had the post-pandemic took the greatest blow, I would wager on New York over San Francisco.
1,000,000%. 100. I completely agree. Yep.
I mean, obviously, I'm a genius, but beyond
No, I
that.
think. No, I mean clearly. No, I think New York is at risk of. I think the 2020 may have changed New York permanently. I think that the demographics going to change. I think the the inner city demographic in terms of who comes into the city is going to change. I think that a lot of people that used to commute into Manhattan from hour and a half away are going to find other hubs that are kind of closer to them. I think that the commercialization in sort of the big city New York is in for a drastic change in the next few years. Maybe that's partly because I love Boston as much as I do. But
let's go Sox. Well, I think the other thing is that if you had to live in one spot, San Francisco or New York City, San Francisco obviously is just a nicer spot to live. New York has a huge advantage because people immigrated there at the foundation of our country, so it has a nice little head start over New York. Over San Francisco. But that aside, if you look at the past few months with Cuomo and De Blasio, I don't like either one of them, but Cuomo. Okay, if you're above 70, Cuomo will kill you by sending you to a nursing home. De Blasio will kill you and tax you to death and then laugh at the fact that he's taxing you to death and not understand that you're going to leave despite the fact he's taxing you to death. Whereas Cuomo, at some point, he's like, okay, listen. I might have killed your grandparents. I might have killed your great-grandparents, but I need you to stay. And so at least he's somewhat rational. De Blasio is not. And with Andrew Yang coming in, I don't think that that's a step in the right direction. I say he's coming in. He's going to run.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. We can talk about that another time. I don't think that's pertinent for today. But I mean, I'm actually out of the potential presidential candidate pool, for the 2020. Would I have been super stoked if he had won the election? Not so much. But the top of my list was Andrew Yang. I mean, it was Andrew Yang at number one, and then there was a large gap between him and number two. Most of that is because to one of the points that you and I have talked about a number of times, he is actually anti-establishment, other than this crackpot we have in office right now who pretends to. By the way, we're 15 days away from inauguration. Is he going to pardon Snowden and Assange, or is this entire thing just going to blow up and it's a total farce from the word go? I mean, what's happening here? I don't know. That's not here nor there.
We'll have a debate over Andrew Yang. The man literally runs on buying your vote. I will give you $2,000 if you vote for me.
So that platform point it's a non-starter. It's poorly packaged. It's never going to work. But if you take the UBI out of his platform and you remove that just entirely and you ignore that and you're like, okay, I'm never going to agree with that. If you look at the rest of his platform, like I said, I think that he actually is the anti-establishment candidate. He comes from, crazy enough, but he actually comes from places where he's been successful in sort of implementing some of these things before. So it's not just flying blind. Like I said, would I have voted for him? Yeah, it would have been tough.
You didn't even vote for me. You wouldn't vote for me. That's what still hurts me.
You know what? I'll
Andrew Yang. I should have been top of your list.
I'll even say it on air for your benefit, right in front of people. When I was standing at the ballot box this year, I stood there for about 30 seconds and I was like, okay, well, I clearly don't want to vote for either one of these frauds. Should I just put Ryan's name down? And I decided what I decided, and I think I told you this off air. What I decided was that I didn't want to have to get called into the FBI or the CIA in 25 years from now. Hey, so we noticed that you voted for this guy in 2020. He's now done all these things. What's that about? I just didn't want to answer the questions that were going to come with the vote, but I would have voted for you otherwise.
Xi Jinping's successor. He voted for in 2020. What was going on here? Yeah, I understand. And listen, if Xi Jinping is looking for a successor, I would take that role. I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there.
You know what? And I mean this with all due respect. You would do phenomenal at that.
I'm just saying, if China needs someone to come clean it up, holla at your boy. Just saying. Ben's walked off for a second time. That's wonderful. I don't think he realizes that we're live and how that we're live. So I'll just talk here about what's next. Oh, you're back. It's wonderful.
Yep.
We're live, right? Like we're live.
Yeah, I mean, if you keep talking, I don't think people are going to notice that I'm leaving. But yes, that is correct. I do know that we're live.
Good. Oh, let's see here. Good point. Okay, so let's talk about blockchain and decentralization. As over the past, I don't know, month or so, Bitcoin has gotten a big run in the news. I guess is how you say it. Obviously, it's been on a pretty bullish run. I haven't looked to see where it's at today. I know it's down a little bit, but by and large, it's up. And Bitcoin's one thing, but blockchain and decentralization is really kind of the thought process behind what interests some, if not all, not most of the investors into Bitcoin. We'll bring Ben Samuels in here for comment. Ben, good to have you back, reporting live from Parts Unknown. What are your thoughts on how much should we think about? So let's put Bitcoin as a caveat. When we think of Bitcoin news, how much should we then start to think about decentralization, blockchain, stuff like that? Oh! Look who showed up, Ben. Look who showed up.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
What's going on, Brian? How we doing?
Let me tell you something, Brian. You are in these texts. Wait. These texts between him and me, at least once a week, your name makes an appearance. You, sir, there's the camera. You, sir, need to come on this show because we need to talk to you.
For anyone listening out there, you have Brian Mon to thank for this happening. You have him to thank for this coming together. I don't know if thank is the right word, but we're going to go with it.
I don't. Yeah, Brian. So if you want to hop on 1 week, you are welcome, but understand you're coming into the lines then. You're coming in because, yeah, you got it. I don't think you do. Like, I don't think you do. How many times? So, Brian, just so you know, like we have that baseball game that we went to as like the date of infamy. You have like Pearl Harbor, you have 9/11, you have the baseball game. So it's I appreciate you, Brian. I respect you, but this was too much. This was too much. So
if you Brian, if you'd like to make amends, Ryan and I will each take 5 Bitcoin as payment. Ryan, yes?
5 per. That's 5 per, not 5 by 2.
No, yeah, 5 each. Yeah, 5 each. I mean,
Two.
if it was 5 total, I would get 4 and you'd get 1. So might as well get 10. We can split it 5-5.
You see, Brian. You see what you've done.
Oh, you know what? Since Brian is listening, should we just go ahead and tell the $200 story?
Why not? Why not?
No, I'm not even going to do that to you. I
will clip it. And I'll put it on LinkedIn. There it is. There's the offer.
I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do that to you. But so going back to Bitcoin, yeah, I mean it's been on an absolute rip. I haven't actually looked today. I think it's floating around 30,000 or so. It peaked at about 34. I think it came off the peak a little bit down. It's interesting. So a couple of things that right now. So we're at year end, and for those that have maybe been in Bitcoin a little bit longer, or maybe following the crypto markets for longer than just the last few months, you may remember that in 2017, around the same time, the Bitcoin price was trading at about, I think it was about, it was like 3,000, 4,000, somewhere like that. And within about 3 weeks, it popped and spiked up to the previous all-time high, which is right around 19,300 or so. And then there was a massive sell-off. And by, I think it was mid-March, the price had come back down to, it was in like the 7s, I want to say. And that's really pretty rough, but I think that's the general story. And the reason for that, and the point really of telling that story is that every year there is, there's a massive influx in accumulation of Bitcoin and traffic on the investment, or on the transactions, I should say, towards the end of the year. And then as people need to pay taxes, especially in the United States, kind of towards the end of Q1 and into the beginning of Q2, there's always a massive sell-off. And so, if you look at the kind of the 5-year, the 10-year horizon Bitcoin chart, you see these peaks and valleys right at the same time every single year. And so part of what we saw, what we're seeing is normal. Part of what we're seeing is just sort of that normal trend. And then, the other piece of the puzzle here, and this is something that you and I have talked about off air a lot, or actually maybe not as in depth as with some others, but for those that are following this story, Michael Saylor is the CEO of a group called MicroStrategy, which is one of the largest Bitcoin accumulation investment firms out there right now. I think at current, they own something like 75,000 Bitcoin that they've accumulated over the last couple of years. They purchased a large amount, and again, I'm not going to speak numbers, I forget how much, but they purchased a large amount, tens of thousands of Bitcoin on December 4th of this year, and then quickly after that, the price went up. For those that are familiar with price elasticity and supply and demand, and if you couple those, that sort of knowledge with, Bitcoin only having 21.5 million in existence. There was a recent Bitcoin halving. I know I'm going through a bunch of these things kind of quickly because I don't know if there's a lot of interest in really digging into these, but those are some definite factors here. And the reason I bring up MicroStrategy is because unlike the S&P 500 or the stock market, where there certainly is manipulation in the market, there's the whales or the big money in the industry can take, like the corn or wheat stock in a certain direction for a certain time. That sort of thing happens all the time. In crypto, that volatility can be massive. And so one group that has, one large accumulation can have, tens of % effect on the market in a short term. And the reason I bring that up is because so you saw a lot of the Bitcoin get purchased. I shouldn't say obviously, but those Bitcoin transactions of that volume are never done on an exchange. That was a private sale done, what's called over the counter. Don't know where they accumulated it from, but it wasn't just buying off of like Coinbase or something of that nature. But the reason it's really important is because now that they have the position that they do, and I think that they own something like $2.5 billion, give or take, in Bitcoin assets, in fiat equivalency. Thank you for that. I like that. I actually like being on that side better. Thank you. But it catches my good side or something like that. But now they're into the driver's seat in the sense. So I don't think this is going to happen. But let's just say that in 1 week they decide to dump all 75,000 of those Bitcoin onto the market. That is going to have a massive effect. Now, will that happen? No, they're not going to do that. But it doesn't have to be 75,000 Bitcoin. If they decide to sell half that position or a quarter of that position or 10% of that position, those can be big changes in the market. And so, like I think I said to you this to you yesterday or a couple of days ago in text, over the next 12-week term between now and let's say the end of let's say 16 weeks between now and the end of April, okay. I could very easily see a price peak north of 50, 55, or even 60,000. But I could just as easily see a valley down sub 10,000, maybe even sub 6,000 or 7,000. And I could see both of those things happening together. I mean, I could see both of those events happening.
Yeah, both and not even more. It could be more, but both and as well.
Exactly. And so that just paints a picture of, even when you're talking about like the unbelievable run that Tesla had this year, some of the other, S&P or New York Stock Exchange tickers that, had massive movements this year. There's very little in those sort of retail markets that can move unless like a company goes bankrupt or some major announcement, right? But like in terms of just transactional day to day, there's very little that's going to move the price that much. Whereas, so Bitcoin, one of the this isn't an answer to the question, but kind of leading to what I just said. One of the problems that I have with sort of the narrative around Bitcoin right now is that it is sort of talked about as a safe haven asset, and I think that by definition it is whatever the opposite of a safe haven asset is. It's that. I get the argument that it's a safe haven asset in the sense that it's outside of governmental control, etc. And if you kind of go down that lane, but in terms of safe haven asset, in terms of something that is, when I think of safe haven asset, some of the other things that I think about are stability and universal use, etc. And Bitcoin is nowhere near those critical tipping points there. And so, like I said, I know that was a lot, but I kind of wanted to condense a lot of that. We can unpack any piece of that you want, but those are some of my kind of overarching thoughts in terms of where the market is.
You might not have any idea. Let me just ask you this: do you have any perspective on what the average cost of those bitcoins would have been they purchased? Like 3,000? You're thinking 4,000, 5,000?
What their blended cost is?
Yeah.
I don't know, and that won't be public information, and that, like, that's what I was saying about the over the counter transactions. That's another reason that they do it that way, because there's no way to track that, and it won't ever be announced.
Right. So my one of the things I was thinking through here is, let's say you had, let's make the math easy, 100,000 bitcoins, and then you wanted to dump 50,000. Would have dumped 50,000. And let's say they bought them for 10. Okay, so they bought them for 10, and it's at 30 now. So they're going to dump 50,000. Well, they've made $20,000 per Bitcoin, everyone they had, right? Okay, so they dump it. They need the retracement to go down enough so that when they buy back in the market, that they can get that upside again. So they have to. But to your point, though, do you think that there's a trigger price to where it hits, 40,000 or 38,000 or 52,000, and automatically the algorithm sells them out publicly on Coinbase, or would it have to be a private transaction? How would they unload those? Because I would assume that their investors in them came to an agreement that we're going to sell at this point. Because to your point, it's nice to have all this Bitcoin, but until you convert to cash, it's not worth a whole lot. It's like saying, it was like this: when you look at Bill Gates' net worth, his net worth is not how much cash he has, right? He'd have to liquidate a lot of stuff to have that net worth. So if you have $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, that's your net worth, but that doesn't mean you can actually go spend $1 billion today. I know there's probably enough people that would take it. It's a little bit different. It's not 1-to-1, but you.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you with that train of thought. I think that the one piece that I want to clarify or talk a little bit more about, because I don't agree, is the idea that when you have Bitcoin, you're sort of illiquid, right? Because you're really not, in the sense that, like, if MicroStrategy, if they have 100,000 Bitcoin and they need liquidity, you can in the current environment, you can gain liquidity leverage off of Bitcoin. You wouldn't have to turn it into fiat. That's a minute point, but I think it is important because I know nothing about MicroStrategy's inner workings. I only know about what they say to the public, right? And so, take all this with a grain of salt. Actually, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
that would be great. Let's get Michael Saylor on, because I've got some questions. Michael, if you're listening to this, let's talk. No, but I think when you're looking at this MicroStrategy, I think that their game plan is short-term arbitrage and long-term hold. And what I mean by that is that they are incentivized to a large degree, in my opinion, to have that volatility in the market. And now that they have the position that they do, they can create that volatility on their own. And so they're sort of creating their own profit on their own. And the
they have to, right? They have to. So they have to do it now, because the more Bitcoins there are and the more market saturation there is, the harder it is for them to influence the market, right? So if you peaked at 21 billion Bitcoin, them dropping 50,000 is not going to do anything. So the longer they wait and the more Bitcoin they're mined, the harder it is for them to influence the market.
So when the price moves, when there's a massive dump, so like, let's say there was 50,000 Bitcoin dumped in a day onto the exchanges, the price doesn't move because there's the Bitcoin available. It moves because of the it's supply and demand. It moves because of the influx of supply, so the price drops, right? And so what you're talking about is the other side, which is resource scarcity, because once there's more Bitcoin mined, there's the volatility is still there, because intraday or intra-week or intra-month, when there's a massive amount that's dropped onto the market, the price is going to decrease. But I guess the other side of that coin is, so let's say the MicroStrategy was purely an accumulator. They had no design on trading. They didn't want to sell. They were just buying, and they were just going to hold forever. Okay. That means that those Bitcoin are coming offline. They're coming off market. They're not going anywhere. They're sitting in a vault. That that means that, so if they continue to do that, let's say that they have 100,000 Bitcoin today and they have 500,000 Bitcoin by, in 10 years from now. So that means that they own, 500,000 out of the 21.5 million total. And I think that's a much more important piece of the market or argument to make in terms of how many people in the market today, right now, are buying Bitcoin just to hold it and do nothing with it. Because those Bitcoin, unlike fiat, where it's circular and like it's a made up currency or I shouldn't say made up, but it's a social construct as it is. And so like the paper money, I mean, so let me say it this way. If there's $100 billion sitting in the federal treasury, or if there's $1 trillion sitting in the treasury, the value of like the scarcity of the dollar on the street is no different, right? Because it doesn't matter how much paper there is. Whereas in Bitcoin, it does. And so if there's a larger percentage, or if it continues to be a larger percentage of people that are purely buying as an investment speculation just to put on a cold hardware wallet and do nothing with, like that's where you get the serious and that's where I think the people that are talking about seeing these $100,000, $200,000, $250,000, $500,000 per Bitcoin prices are talking about. Because once it turns into, going back to my previous point, once Bitcoin turns into more of a store of value rather than just sort of this speculation, it's going to turn into gold. I mean, you don't see people buying gold, or like, people aren't like carrying around gold in the street, right? And so, what's that?
Peter Schiff is.
Well, I mean, there are some for sure, but I mean,
he has a gold credit card. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not. He has a gold credit card.
Really?
He has a gold credit card that's linked to his gold in wherever it's at. And so when he swipes his debit card, it converts from gold to US dollar or wherever instantaneously. And it's literally a gold credit card.
That's pretty cool. Do you have the 15-digit number?
Maybe.
But I was.
I'm sorry. You're talking about when we hit.
One last thing. What were you saying?
You're going on your point to where we kind of hit max arbitrage and people carrying around, and people aren't carrying around like they do. Like people aren't carrying around gold in the streets. Is what you're saying?
Yeah. I forget. But no, sorry. But so I think that there's a lot more there in terms of the sort of the thesis of Bitcoin, like I was saying, that sort of value, where you like, let me say it this way: the people that are Bitcoin maximalists right now, they're not going out and like paying for lunch with Bitcoin, right? Like that's not happening. It's a more of a long-term speculation. I know actually what I was going to say is I know I said a lot there, and we can unpack kind of any piece of that or none of that if you'd like.
Let me ask you this. So this is one of the the questions I have. So let's say I own a retail store, okay, and you want to come in and buy my suits. I sell suits, okay. So you come in and I've got a $100 suit, okay. So you come to the cash register and you have your phone and you put it up there and you say, I want to pay in Bitcoin. I'm like, okay, cool. I've got a Bitcoin payment system. So you pay me in Bitcoin. As a retailer, because of the way the tax laws work, I would imagine I would be incentivized to then get it out of Bitcoin into dollars because, let's just say 30,000. Bitcoin's worth 30,000. The suit was a $30,000 suit. So you gave me one Bitcoin just to make the math easy. Okay. If I don't convert that to US dollar immediately, then Bitcoin plummets to $5,000. I don't think the U.S. government would then say, oh, well, okay, obviously the transaction was $30,000 on January 1st, but Bitcoin by tax time or by the end of the year was worth $5,000 when you sold it. And so we're going to charge you $5,000 for your taxes, right?
Yeah, great point. And I follow the logic there. I think most of the payment processors that interface with Bitcoin immediately transact into fiat.
No. Yes. So because of that, even if they didn't, as a retail shop owner, you would demand it because you would be afraid that the price could go off the rails. The next thing you know, you've lost all your value in Bitcoin and you didn't convert to dollars. So until that is fixed, it won't be a common currency. It won't be commonly used because as someone who collects, if I'm trying to exchange it and I'm the receiver of it, I need to get it out of Bitcoin into dollars because I have an inherent risk built in by leaving it in Bitcoin. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Two things though. Number one, it also works the other way, right? Because if you sold something in March of this year and you sat on it, you're really happy. But the other sorry, go ahead.
Yes, it could go up. Yes, right.
Oh, yeah. But the other, I forgot the last part, the second point I was going to make. You're doing a good job today. It's okay. Talk off.
I was saying, as a store owner, I get the money. I want to convert to dollars immediately because the value of the Bitcoin go down. I'm going to pay taxes on the U.S. dollar version of that. And you said, well, of course, it could go up, which is true. You could have. So if you were transacting in Bitcoin and you didn't convert to dollars in March, and someone bought you a $30,000 suit in March, or a $3,000 suit in March, that suit now is worth $30,000, right? And so if you'd held on to your Bitcoin, but until that angle is worked out with the government, it's hard to make it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No. The other thing I was going to say is that I think it's really important for people to realize that, and I think it's really frustrating to me because Bitcoin has never been, never will be, and never should be looked at as a transactional currency. That's not the point. Like the idea of Bitcoin is not to go into the store, into Men's Warehouse, and buy the $1,000 suit with Bitcoin. There are a litany of transactional monetary cryptocurrencies out there for that, but Bitcoin was never. That's not the point of Bitcoin. And I know that's not what you're saying, but I think that's an important distinction because there are places that take Bitcoin right now. Like I think you can buy stuff on Amazon with Bitcoin.
Well, I did open up some Bitcoin ATMs a few months back. This time last year, I was looking at it. I say looking at it. No, it'd been closer to April. I started looking at it because I was like, because the exchange rate's pretty good. On if someone's covering dollars, you're cutting fee, but I got depressed. So I just got depressed with the economy, and I looked at it for like 3 days, and I was like, I hate my life, and I stopped.
So I for anyone listening, keep in mind the ticker at the bottom right here that says "Don't let the facts." I looked at it as well. I looked at it about 2-3 years ago. And the reason I veered off of it is because if you think the tax threshold and kind of what you need to do to be put in place to own crypto is onerous, you got another thing coming when you look at what they want from you to run Bitcoin ATMs.
If you'd have bought one a year ago during this bull run.
But no, what I'm saying is so I will never own a Bitcoin ATM until they change the regulations that are tied with it. Even in this for crypto run, I mean, it would have been profitable, but at what cost?
Feds with a flashlight up your rectum. That's the cost. That's Tuesday. So.
I really wish that we could play the last 30 seconds of that song that I sent you right before we went on air. It's just like those two voicemails. It'd be oh man, what else we got? What else are we talking about today?
I'm gonna throw you a little curveball because you hate curveballs on this show. So I'm gonna throw you a curveball. Yeah.
I'm ready.
Question: 2021. If you, Ben Samuels, weren't the successful tycoon that you are, and you were trying to figure out what to do, would you let's just say you had 100K laying around or 200K. I don't know. You don't have millions of dollars. You got 50 to 150,000. I don't care. Pick a number where it's enough to kind of get something going, but it's not enough to fund yourself for perpetually, right?
Okay. I was looking for the money. I didn't see any, but okay.
It's open. Okay, so open that door first and that door second. The Bitcoin's on one door, the gold's on the other one. So however you want to.
All right. Well, you're not allowed to see what's behind that one. So
I almost made a comment that I didn't. So thankfully. Okay. You got $50 to $150,000, 75. I don't care. Pick a number in there. More than 10, less than $1 million, something like that. Would you recommend? Yeah, have a kind of a good range there for you. Would you recommend going into a service business like residential services? So that can be pools, that can be I don't know, whatever. Or B, so B2B or B2C, put it like that. You're going into business for yourself, B2B, B2C for 2021.
Just like at a macro, high level, just pick one.
Yeah, and why?
Yeah, that might be a too high level of a question for me to answer because I could it's specific to certain markets. I certainly would have a answer on one side of the fence or the other.
What would you do? Not what should people do, but what would you do?
Oh, like Ben personally?
In person.
Oh, um, that's a really good question. I think I would advocate, or I would probably veer towards B2C.
Okay.
I think there is a lot to be said for that kind of interconnectedness of being able to connect with an audience that's broader than in B2B. I think that you kind of get siloed you can get siloed pretty easily, whereas with B2C you're able to I think that the experience of kind of creating a product around the feedback that you're getting from the market and being able to kind of address the needs in real time, quote unquote, is exciting to someone like me, as opposed to with B2B. I think that's a lot. When I think about B2B, I think about a lot more red tape and a lot more bureaucracy and a lot more the processes and okay, speaking about oil field stuff for a second, like the MSAs and certain insurances and like there's just a lot of there's a lot of things that have to happen. Whereas with B2C, you can kind of create your own fairway. You can create the processes yourself, and you can create that experience back and forth between the business and the customer. And I think you have a lot more authenticity, a lot more chance to be authentic in that experience. And as people that have listened to this, and certainly those are the sort of things that I would lean towards. But the reason I said that their side, because I could certainly see sort of what I just said being true in some B2B instances. What about you? What do you think?
I don't know. I think about this question a lot. So the problem with the BAC model is that if you're in the wrong type of business, I say wrong, that's not right, but let me give you an example. Okay. If you are, I don't know, retail sales, okay.
Mm-hmm.
The customer comes in, the transaction happens right then. You're going to have some returns and a little bit of theft. You're going to have some of that. But generally speaking, you get your money and the customer's gone, right? Mm-hmm. If you get into other type of B2C businesses, like, I don't know off the top of my head, collection becomes a problem. And collection is important, but it's kind of a catch-22, because like, I got to go spend 3 hours to get $50. But if I don't get that $50, and so it kind of gets this cross where you need the money because that's your business, but it's also not worth your time to collect the money. But if you don't collect the money, it compounds. So you kind of have that weird dynamic. However, if you have the right B2C, you could sell at such a scale that it becomes worth your time to have someone collect that money. All the things you said about B2B are very true. And with B2B, you can scale a little bit faster, maybe make a little bit better margin, and so there's some advantages there. Those insurances, which are deterrents, are also advantages, because if you can afford the $75,000 professional liability insurance, some of your competitors won't do that because it's just too expensive. And so you have some. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, do you think that it's easier to scale a business? And I'm talking about like blitz scale. Like, do you think it's easier to scale a business B2B than B2C? I don't know if I agree with that. That's interesting.
Did I say that? That's not what I was trying to say.
You said that you would think it would be easier to scale a B2B as opposed to B2C. I don't know if that's what you meant, but maybe that's not what you said. That's what I heard. That's what came in the earpiece.
Rewind the tape. Rewind the tape. No, I don't know. That's why I said that's not what I meant. I don't know why. Okay. Let's say I said that. You've corrected me. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, it's easier to scale B2C. I do agree with that. Right. I think what I'm trying to say is on B2B. So let's take let's just take plumbing for an example. I don't know how it works in oil and gas, but theoretically, whatever plumber's insurance they have is probably like $1 million, I guess. I don't know, some kind of general liability fund, right? Plumbers there can let us know. And so they're going to Bob's house, Tom's house, whatever. And so you can scale that pretty broadly because you're just trying to convert customers. Right. Advantage you could have over other plumbers is theoretically is if oil and gas companies or corporate clients required a $10 million policy that most of your competitors didn't want to spend the money on. So you could create a competitive advantage that way by being willing to go and get the licenses or the insurances. And so you can scale uniquely that way, whereas everyone can kind of compete at the B2C level. Does that make sense? You're muted for what it's worth.
That's probably better for everybody. That makes sense.
So, like, if in tech, this doesn't necessarily apply because in tech, you don't have to deal with a lot of stuff that you mentioned, MSAs, insurance, stuff like that. When you're starting out, you're trying to build a concept, you're trying to get it going, and then at some point, some of that stuff comes in. Service businesses, though, you're kind of torn. Do you deal with 1,000 Ryan Ray and Ben Samuels, or do you try to deal with 15 corporate clients? And there's just different pros and cons there.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot there. Yeah, as you were talking, one of the things. I don't know how often. Well, actually, I'll ask it as a question. How often do you find yourself, I don't know, on a weekly basis, talking to the customer service rep at some product that you're, subscriber of or whatever, and you need assistance doing something?
Never.
How often? You don't ever have you don't ever have to call your bank or call like you don't have a service provider that gives you any really? Okay, so
my wife does most of that. So.
That's true. Okay, fair enough. So my cats don't make phone calls, unfortunately. So I have to make those. So
if you figure that out, though, that's B2B and B2C. That's gold.
But parenthetically, if Haley is looking for some additional work, there might be might be something. What's that?
She usually watches this, so just be
careful. Right?
Yeah.
I actually think everything I've said about her on all the podcasts has been glowing, and so
like she may invoice you preemptively.
Oh, hey, you know what? As long as it's over $200, it'll be okay. Too soon? Too much?
Go ahead.
So I find myself doing that quite a bit. So I run. I have that sports cards business that's sort of taken on its own legs, and so I've been working with like eBay and PayPal a lot more frequently, but also just in general service providers. I get really frustrated at this notion that these companies have figured out that basically you're going to be a customer no matter how they treat you, and so they can say whatever they want. They can have policies that basically say whatever it is, and it's like you either fall in line with the policy or go somewhere else. And with like an eBay or a PayPal, a lot of times you don't have the ability to go somewhere else because of the market dominance that whoever that has. And so and where I'm getting to, this is maybe a longer way to get to the example, but what I'm getting to is one of the things that I had thought about actually as of recently quite a bit is that I think there is a massive need and a massive sort of missing piece of a market niche of basically a build to suite third-party customer service center company, but actually customer focused and customer centric, because I think that there certainly is an argument to be made that the reason that the policies are the way that they are and the reason that the customer service reps act the way that they do is with intent, because that's just the way that the company wants to be branded. I don't think that I believe that. I think that it's a lack of training and a lack of actual know-how of how to treat customers, because I think that it's much more in sort of the messaging and the branding and the interfacing of how that customer rep takes that phone call, as opposed to like what the decision is made, right? There's one way to tell someone no, where they get off the phone and they're like, F you, will never do, giving you another $1. There's another way to tell the person no, where they're like, you know what, I actually understand why that makes sense. And okay, that I don't like it, but okay, I appreciate the fact that they dug in and told me that. And so I guess a long way of saying that would be kind of a cross, I think, between B2B and B2C, because you're kind of doing both, right? You have to have that B2B connection, especially if you're let's take an example. If you're an Oracle has a litany of B2B contracts, but they also do a ton of B2C. And so you'd have to kind of do both. And so I think there's also a certain element of some of the service industries, like you talked about, you sort of have to play both sides of that coin, right? And I think the problem that I see a lot of times, especially in the oil and gas space to a degree, but across a lot of other industries, is that there's a lot of times where one company hasn't figured out that they are serving both businesses and customers, and they have just like one set of policies, and that means that one side of the coin or the other is getting totally shafted. And I'm kind of getting on more of a rant than actually making cogent points, but I think there's something to that. I mean, that's normal for me, right? Thank you.
So I will give you 3 words. 3 words. I will summarize everything you said in 3 words. Chick-fil-A.
Not on Sundays. There's another 3 words.
Okay. 6 words. Chick-fil-A's except for on Sundays. 7 words. How about that? But no, I mean, seriously, Look at Chick-fil-A, look at how they do it, and they have mastered the fast food service, customer service business. You go to other fast food restaurants now, and people say, you say, thank you, and they go, my pleasure. Like, they have dominated the game. When you go to Chick-fil-A, I swear to you, their worker to customer ratio is the greatest I've ever seen for any fast food and probably most restaurants. Okay, it is unbelievable. And they're selling you a $4 chicken sandwich. Okay, think about that. Chicken and it's a quality sandwich. It's not like you're getting Burger King, for crying out loud. You're getting good food here. Really? I thought I'd get a nothing. Okay, whatever. Okay. Anyways, you're getting good quality food, and so yeah. So you're getting good food, and so when you go in, they have people, and so now I don't know about the Chick-fil-A's out there in Midland, but I think the ones here in Granbury are still doing the drive-through. But and so they have like 6 people in the drive-through, which they had 3 people in the drive-through before the COVID lockdown. Taking your order, processing, and so it makes the drive-through experience faster. And so I think that, to your point, yes, Chick-fil-A, because they are serving the public, and let's be honest here, the drive-through public and the fast food public is probably some of the hardest people to please on the planet, right? And they are masters at it. So that's all. I said 3 words.
That was a little bit more than 3. No, I mean Chick-fil-A is a great example of a company that's doing it right, that understands their customer base, that gets the branding. So Brian, that's a great point. I mean, that's something Brian, if you didn't get a chance to listen to the Bringing the Closures podcast, Ryan and I actually talked a lot about this concept, about the authenticity and the understanding, and just sort of the ability to explain the decision can make that friction go away. I mean, I can't tell you how frustrated I get when I get on the phone with somebody, or I go into the bank, or go into my whatever, any position of authority that I'm paying to, and the answer is no, we can't do what you're asking. And it's like, well, can you tell me why? No, we're just not going to do it. And that's sort of just like, no, and you don't deserve a reason. I think that's sort of kind of what Brian is talking about. I think it's absolutely right.
I agree. So I know we got to wrap it up here. So couple things. One, I used to tell my folks, if a client called and they want to talk about the stock price of McDonald's, we were not stockbrokers, by the way. And they would talk about the stock price of McDonald's. You sit there and talk to them about the stock price of McDonald's, because they're calling you and not your competitor. So always appreciate the fact when your client calls you that they're calling you and not someone else, even if they're mad at you. Because when they're mad, they're calling someone else. That's the worst time. Like, you definitely don't want them calling anyone else when they're mad at you. And so I think Brian's onto something there about building a relationship. The other thing is, to your point about banks, and this is why Chick-fil-A probably is better at it, because they understand that they don't have any corporate clients. I mean, I'm sure there's corporations who get catered jobs and stuff like that, but their customer is Ryan Ray, Ben Samuels, whoever's in the drive-thru. At the bank, and we saw this in the PPP loans. Okay, what you saw was that the big small businesses got a lot of the loans for the PPP because they had good relationships with the bank. It's hard for me to get mad at Chase, let's pick a bank here, because Shake Shack's there. I know Shake Shack's bringing them a lot more revenue. Now, I want to be treated like Shake Shack, but I also understand that Shake Shack's going to get preferential treatment because of that. So banks, I'm not justifying it. I'm saying that they have to figure out, how do you treat your small business or your average consumer clients like you do, or not like you do, but with the same respect and dignity that you do your big clients, because those two do go hand in hand. And I'm sympathetic to the struggle they have, but I'm not going to wash it away either.
So, no, I think it's a great point. I don't love the example only because, I might actually advocate that, the Joe Schmo that can't pay their rent actually does deserve preferential treatment over a Shake Shack with the PPP, like that specific example.
No. I'm saying that, yes. So what I'm saying is, not for PPP, I'm saying from the bank's perspective, if JP Morgan Chase does not call Shake Shack, say, hey, PPP's coming, we're going to take care of, Shake Shack goes to Wells Fargo, and so they lose that. Whereas Ben Samuel goes, they lost. No,
that's very true. That's fair. And obviously, while it is probably never going to happen, and on the business side, it may not make sense. Think about it this way. If you're whatever. If you're the CEO of a somewhat large company, or if you have happen to have some good personal net worth, and you call your banker, basically, I don't care what you ask the banker to do, they're going to do it, right? Like within the law, right? Like if you're asking them to do something legal that they're allowed to do, they're going to move mountains to do whatever you want them to do. If you're, a college student, you've got $27 in your bank account and you've overdrafted 17 times in the last 12 months, and you need anything done, the answer is going to be no.
Okay. I was pause there because I'm 4 hours in today. So the voice is the throat's going. That's a fascinating conversation I want to dig into more because I have some thoughts on that and on banking regulation and how to fix some of those problems. I think you're not going to like them, which is why we need to pick up another episode. I don't have the voice to keep going for another 3 hours on this.
You just need to tell Ellen to take a back seat next time then. Jeez.
Oh, whoa.
Sorry. That's fire.
That's fire. That's Texas. I'm just saying, like, I didn't know you're Texas. So, wow. You're mansplaining to me now. I'm offended.
Wow.
So, wow.
This went off the road real quick.
An hour and 10 is about our limit. After that, it's just done. So if you want to do a follow-up episode this week on banking, or that not banking particularly, but that example, I would love to. We can wait till next week. I'll let you decide. But that's a fascinating discussion, and I think it deserves some time to flesh out because I think it's one of the things that if I say what I wanted to say right now, you would blast me, and then the show would be over, and I wouldn't get to finish my point, and people would think I'm worse than what I really am. I mean, I'm pretty bad.
I think it's much more likely that you would say whatever you were going to say, and we'd be on the air fighting for like 90 minutes.
I know, but my voice is going, my throat's hurting, and so it's 4 hours in today, and so it's like, dude, shut up.
Well, no, I mean, seriously, I was like not joking. Like, it's 4 hours today. I think you were on 2 or 3 yesterday. You were on at least 1 on Saturday. I mean, like you've been clocking it, man. I'm impressed. It's good.
The more I talk, the less people respect me. So that's.
I mean, the comment moderation. By the way, like I've noticed that only like 1 out of every 6 comments that I make actually make the show. So we need to get that ratio up. But
look at the ticker. Look at the ticker. That's all I'm saying. Look at the ticker. Don't let the facts. I didn't know if Ellen would understand the Winnie the Pooh reference or not, and so. Dark G the Pooh or whatever it was. I didn't know if she would get that, so I just said, we're gonna let that one go. I got it. I was tracking. I appreciated that. So I didn't know if she would know what you're talking about. I just don't know one way or another. So
yeah, I should probably keep the Star Wars slanted stuff for you and Kyle.
I mean, yeah. It was a wonderful. It was a wonderful mixing of metaphors that landed perfectly on my desk. I enjoyed it, but I didn't know if she, Star Wars, Winnie the Pooh, Xi Jinping. I didn't know if she would get it all or not. And I'm not. Ellen's a foreign policy guru. I just don't know if she tracks like nerdy stuff like we do. So
that's fair.
So okay, all right, Ben, I'm gonna fire the music up, and I'll let you bring us out with your final thoughts.
Looking forward to a fantastic 2021. I mean, the calendar's changed. It's a whole new year, whole new us, Ryan. Like we got whole new horizons to crush. I mean, it's going to be great. I don't know if you're buying any of that, but
yeah, I will leave it with this. You're welcome, Brian, and everyone. And I'll leave it with this. It's 2021, and yet we're seeing the same old lockdowns. Scotland, England, RIP.
So lockdowns and banking regulations next week.
Let's do it.
Sold.